Hey guys, this is RolloutReviews with RolloutReviews bringing you another BIONICLE review. This time it is set number 70784, Lewa, Master of Jungle. This set contains 85 pieces and retails for about $15 US. Lewa is fairly different from many of his previous incarnations in several different ways. First of all, he is the Master of Jungle instead of Air. On top of that, he's just got a lot more going on as far as his design goes. He's got a couple of new colors added to his palette, and the green is a much lighter shade than we got on Lewa Mata and Lewa Nuva. We'll take a look at his construction, starting from the bottom up. Of course, he has the new armor piece here in silver, acting as sort of shin or knee armor. Towards the bottom, he also has a little bit of orange, which personally, I think complements the much lighter shade of green well. Towards the back, his legs are a little bit bare, but it's not nearly as bad as it was on Tahu, and he does have some friction extenders in his hips. Towards the front, he has a printed chest piece with a rather abstract and all-over-the-place design. It's printed well, but I'm not a big fan of Lewa's in particular. I'm not entirely sure what it is, though. Of course, he has the exposed ball joints on either side of his chest just because of how it's constructed, and there aren't too many ways around that. Towards the back, between these pieces here and this piece back here, he's got a fair bit of back coverage. However, just like the majority of the Toa, this back armor here can look a little bit gappy from some angles, and in his case it is attached with a pin connection, so it can get bumped around quite often. His shoulders are placed abnormally high compared to the rest of the Toa, definitely giving him a unique look. Towards the back, he has these pieces that come up over his shoulders, creating sort of a collar. This has a little bit of movement, but I don't think nearly enough to make it useful or effective. I really do like the design aspect here. They look very cool, sort of reminding me of some kind of fur coat, and I definitely like that. But paired with his raised shoulders, they definitely cause some problems that we'll take a look at later on. His arms themselves are very simply constructed. They are very long, especially compared to his body and his legs, almost giving him simian proportions. He does have a little bit more orange here, a little bit more of the green, which mounts to the front of his arm, interestingly enough, to make room for this connector piece that comes into play with his dual weapon functionality. Just because of how long his arms are, I do feel that maybe he should have had some friction extenders in his shoulders, because sometimes, especially when he's wielding his axes, this joint can be a little bit loose. His weapons are very cool, if not extremely simple. The design of the axe heads is very nice, definitely invoking the earlier Bionicle weapons with the turbine and pistons. Towards the bottom, it has a simple blade, which I suppose gets the job done. I do wish that he held this weapon maybe a little bit further down. I feel that that would give you a lot more options as far as posing goes, especially seeing as the armor on his arms limits his elbow to a 90-degree bend. He also doesn't have any form of rotation in his elbow either. I'd really like to rest this axe on his shoulder, but with his articulation, I can't, and that's unfortunate. Maybe it's a personal problem, but posing this guy with his axes is definitely very awkward. Lewa wears the Mask of Jungle, providing him his elemental abilities. And let's be honest, I think the naming is strange. I understand why they call him the Master of Jungle. He resides in the jungle region, but regardless, I feel this still should have been called the Mask of Air, because jungle is not an element. Maybe that would be confusing to some people, though. I'm not sure. A lot of people seem to think that this has a lot of resemblance to the original Miru, but honestly, I don't see it. Maybe the only similarity to me is that it has a playful grin, and that's about it. You get a golden version of this mask in this set, which, as I've said many times before, is a great convenience, seeing as in 2002, to get the golden versions of the masks, you had to hunt for them in blind boxed mask packs. This makes things that much easier. Of course, now it is time to explore Lewa's nearly fatal design flaw. Because his shoulders are raised so high up, so is the gearbox. It's placed right behind his head. Now, without the mask attached, he has pretty much the full range in his head. He has a little bit of a difficult time looking up, but that's about it. The mask attaches in the same way as all of the others, a couple of little nubs on the inside that go into holes on either side of the headpiece, just like that. Now, with the mask attached, the range of articulation is honestly pitiful. His head goes side to side only about this far. It only goes down about that far. I know it doesn't look like much at all. And up maybe that far. It's all a very awkward, limited, rickety mess. And when you turn his head with his mask attached, you feel like you're kind of bending something in here that you probably shouldn't. It's extremely awkward, even much more so than posing him with his axes. Of course, back here you have the mask launching feature. By pressing down on the eye stalk, his mask goes flying. Unless, of course, you bring his head up to its highest extent, which isn't very far at all. The gearbox then locks that feature in place. This is terrible execution. I appreciate the design uniqueness, what they were going for with raising his shoulders, but it just hits this guy so hard, especially when Lewa is supposed to be the most limber and daring and posable of the group. It's very disappointing. Anyway, here is Lewa with his standard green mask, and here he is with his golden mask. Like the other Toa, Lewa sports a gear function. If we turn to the back here, we can see a bright yellow gear signifying that this is where you activate the gimmick. By turning this left and right, it'll swing his arms up and down. This is where the friction extenders would definitely come in handy in his shoulders, because as you swing his arms, gravity takes his toll on these ball joints here, and eventually they'll come back down and interfere with his legs. Now, of course, just like all of the other gear functions, there's some extra gears in here that just apply some friction so that if I bring his arm up, it doesn't swing back down, and the gears have little interference with the articulation. Now, I mentioned earlier that the gearbox was placed right behind his head. Unfortunately, sometimes when you get Lewa in a pose here, maybe you have his head tucked up right behind, just like that, and then you turn the gear function, and it pops his mask right off. Once again, very unfortunate. His method of dual weapon functionality is extremely simple. Basically, you're going to take the bottom halves of his axes and give them to him as some katanas, much like he had in his Nuva incarnation. From there, you're going to take the rest of the axe and attach it to the back of his arm. The instructions would have you do it like this, and while that looks fine, I much prefer attaching them the other way around. They look much more like wings this way, almost like a bird suit, and that paired with his shoulder armor, kind of looking like a fur coat. Lewa has a Native American vibe in his adrenaline mode here, and I really like that. However, we're meant to believe that this allows Lewa to fly, and this is an even less practical method of flight than his air katana glider from 2002. At least then he had the mask of levitation to aid him, but here it's a little bit ridiculous. I guess you just have to use your imagination. This set includes a dark blue skull spider for Lewa to fight. I really like this color, but it's the same mold as all of the rest. You have the 4 legs that can move, and if we turn it to the back, we can see it acts as a mask. Now Lewa makes things easy for the skull spiders. Sometimes just by swinging his arms, his mask will pop off. And if we attach the skull spider to his face, all it needs to do is bring his head back and it'll lock the pop-off feature in place without even having to bring the upper legs around to the back. You know, maybe this was all planned out. Maybe all these flaws really aren't flaws. I mean, Lewa got himself controlled by the enemy multiple times in the original series. Or maybe I'm just looking too far into this. Don't get me wrong, I like this figure. It's a great set for all of the same reasons Tahu is a great set, just like any of the other Toa. As far as aesthetics goes, he's probably one of my favorites. That said, every set has its flaws, and Lewa just has a few many more than some of the others. I find him difficult to play with, and while he's not towards the top of my list, I can still recommend him. So that is about it, guys, and this is IX Roll It IX, signing off.